Hello. How's everybody doing?
Welcome to your very last session at TC18. We are thrilled that you chose to spend your last hour of TC with us, unless you're taking an exam after this. I think there's some exams, but I digress. We're thrilled to have you with us. How was everybody's data night out? Was it pretty awesome? Anybody pull a hammy in the 40-yard dash? Anybody drink a little too much and they're a little slow this morning? Or didn't drink enough because we were really excited about presenting to you here and a little nervous? Yeah. So thank you again for coming. We're really excited to talk about our topic today, operational excellence. And without further ado, we're going to get started by getting a little cheeky. Don't ask me what to do. You should already know. Tableau for operational excellence. My name is Heather Morelli, and I'm the Senior Director of Sustaining Engineering in the Enterprise Applications Group at Tableau. I work with a great group of people that's comprised of a few different disciplines: quality assurance engineering, automation engineering, systems engineering, performance engineering, cloud-based administrators, Scrum Masters, a release manager, and a triage team. So quite a number of people. We like to consider ourselves the ops team of the ops team. And with me is my colleague, Andrew.
Hello, I am Andrew Levy. I am also in Enterprise Applications. I happen to be one of the very few people that does not report into Heather. I am a technical product manager, and I support Tableau's e-commerce platform.
So before we get on with it, we're going to go ahead and give you a little bit of an overview on the agenda. But one more piece of housekeeping. Today is my birthday. Thank you. For my birthday, Tableau said, you get to present. I don't know if I'll ask for that gift again next year, but your participation, enthusiasm, and appreciation for our topic in the next hour will be your gift to me, and maybe I will do it again in the future. So, our agenda. Who are we, and why are we up here? We're going to show you how we use our product to bring awareness to areas not previously tracked, highlight items that could use extra attention, and see things we may not see when we're so focused on one task to not see what else we could be working on or help improve our own day jobs. What your day job doesn't consider. We empathize with anyone in this room that feels as though there are never enough hours in the day to get your job done and to think about how you can do your job better. What do we mean by operational excellence? Andrew's going to go over that in a bit, and then we'll show you lots of vizzes about what that is and how we do our job at TechOps. Then Andrew is going to give you the best demo in this room at this hour today. And then at the end, we will conclude and leave some time for Q&A. So we think we're going to be talking for about 45, 50 minutes, and then we'll have Q&A. So, enterprise applications. What does enterprise applications do? Well, at Tableau, we're part of the technical operations or TechOps group. So, all of you in this room are customers, directly or indirectly, of Tableau because you're at this conference. And how you got here at this conference, how you purchased something, that is one of the pieces of software and integrations that enterprise applications is responsible for. So, when you bought your ticket over the past 9 months or to a year to get here, that was enterprise applications. Earlier today, we launched our new TC19, Buy Some Today. That also was enterprise applications that worked on delivering the software and the ability for you to purchase for TC19 next year. Also, as customers, directly or indirectly, you need access to the software. And how do you get that access is through assets. There's a customer portal where some of you in this room may administer that customer portal for Tableau. We built that portal. Earlier this week, we launched a new partner portal. We built that too. Order processing from quoting to actually processing the order to then delivering the keys and the licensing system and where that licensing system lives, all stuff that enterprise applications supports. There's also a peer group of teams of mine that has our developers, as Andrew said, program managers, and there's also another team in enterprise applications that runs Tableau on Tableau for our company, and they're the enterprise analytics division. Sister or peer groups, also in tech ops, would be corporate IT. We also have a business operations or a planning group, and we have a workplace group. And together, our org is technical operations. So that's who we are, and I'm going to hand it over now to Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So a little background on me. When I first started at Tableau, I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing, just no idea. My manager and I both started at the same time, and so this was very much a case of the blind leading the blind. I had no idea or a grasp on the intricacies of the systems and tools that I was supposed to be building and supporting. And I didn't know what success looked like for me, for my team, for my org. I couldn't tell what was a real problem when we got, random requests coming in. I couldn't tell if, is this a real problem? Is this a manual process that we support on a daily basis? I would later come to realize that everything is a manual process, so that question is irrelevant, but I digress. I'm sure a bunch of you are familiar with that concept. And I didn't know, who are the stakeholders that I'm supposed to be supporting? Is this person that's coming to me with this problem somebody that I'm responsible for helping? Or is this somebody who's just yelling really loud and I am, a sucker for punishment, I guess. So when we started a new job, or we're in a job, as an individual contributor, as a manager of teams of individual contributors, there's a million different channels that work can get to us. So email, Slack, request queues, hallway conversations, tickets, or the dreaded desk drive-by, which happens more than we would like. And so when we have all these different channels of inputs, how do we know what we should be working on? So in enterprise applications, we use the principle of operational excellence to help us answer that question. So what is operational excellence? So OE is the philosophy of embracing tools and activities that create sustainable improvement within an organization. That is kind of ambiguous and a mouthful and doesn't mean a whole lot. Operational excellence in practice is different for different companies, different organizations, different people individually. And so it's hard to articulate what that means without seeing a tangible example. So let's talk about what OE means in enterprise applications at Tableau specifically. So we use it as a framework to make sure that our systems are functioning as we expect them to by asking 3 questions driving towards 3 pillars. Number 1, is it broken? So production events and outages are almost always our number 1 priority. If something is broken, there's really no question we are going to fix that thing because it's used by either internal stakeholders or customers. They rely on these things to use and sell Tableau. The next thing is, what is the true priority? So outside of fixing broken things and ensuring our systems are working as we expect, we also get heaps of requests from internal stakeholders from different channels like I mentioned. And so determining what the true priority of those requests are is super important so we know what we're supposed to be working on. And then so the last question that we want to answer is, are we successful at the work that we're doing? So once we know what we should be focusing on, we want to understand, again, how successful we are. So if we can answer these 3 questions, drive towards these 3 pillars, we don't need to ask what we should be working on. We already know the answer to that question. So today, we're going to go through 3 different stories that exemplify these 3 different things. And then after that, we're also going to look at a framework that helps us build these processes. And then as Heather mentioned, I'll give a quick demo that exemplifies all 3 of these things. I am now going to turn it over to Heather to talk about order processing.
So I'm going to tell you a story, an order story, if it's broken. I love order processing. It's kind of sad. From day one, I've heard the operations version of our company motto. We help Tableau build and sell its software. And order processing is at the heart of this, and a major component of the EA team's focus in continuing to iterate on how we process orders and ensuring that order processing doesn't break, especially at the end of the quarter. And order processing is what it sounds like. We take some transactional inputs from you as the customer, what you want to buy, how much you want to buy, what's your account information, how do you want to pay for it, and we then take all of that, transact it within our system, and hand you back the assets, aka keys, or e-learning codes to get into e-learning, send you an email with that information, and provide you with invoices. And there exists a team of people dedicated to ensuring that all of that transactional info is in shipshape condition before they then send that through the automated order processing assistant that we've built. When Tableau first started, a lot of those were manual processes, and we've since automated many of them. The other interesting aspect of order processing was that while we automated the act of processing the orders, we didn't really pay attention to how we were going to monitor if order processing was still happening or not. And there was one person within enterprise applications who took it upon themselves to pull the information by logging in through a UI and seeing if orders were still processing or not, as often as they could remember to, fitting it in between their day job. This person would then fix it behind the scenes. Nobody else would know what was going on, and so nobody else really knew or understood the nuances of how the more complex orders were still able to get by when they errored out. And thus, we created a single point of failure. So one of the pillars for how we view operational excellence is the ability for us to know when there's a problem before our customer tells us. So in 2016, after one too many times of our customer telling us orders are broken, they're not processing, we had to do something about it. And so this was an instance of somebody didn't have to tell us what to do, we just had enough, and we needed to go figure out a way to get in front of our orders telling us that something was broken. And so this viz is our first foray into how we were going to start monitoring proactively if orders were broken, or if orders were still processing or not. And we built this viz based on some requirements that I gave to my automation engineering team around how the customer operations team said orders weren't processing. So my team took those inputs and they built a way to grab the data, created a data source, and then built this viz on top of it. OPA stands for Order Processing Assistant. And so anytime we would get information that says, well, OPA is broken, we would now be able to use this viz. Here you can see the red increasing here. Red we're using as a color to signify that orders are not processing. So we don't like to see this climb. Based on this and some alerting in the background, our triage team was now able to go in and proactively look at what was halting the orders and start researching it, and if it was too much for them to research, they would then escalate to the experts. We were also able to proactively tell customer operations that things weren't going so well. So rather than them starting to panic about, wait, it doesn't look like things are going so well, we were able to tell them before they came to us, which was pretty awesome. This spike also was an awareness for, red lines, steps are stuck. This spike is also an awareness for the team to know when there might be a proactive, go take a look, make sure orders are still processing as we expect them to. The other thing about this viz is that my VP and I subscribe to it nightly. And so in the morning, whenever we subscribed, we get a view of this for the past 24 hours, and we'd be able to see, well, how did the orders progress over the past 24 hours, and if there were issues or not. And we were able to use that viz to ask more questions. And it allowed us to self-serve on how orders were processing. So as the triage team became more well-versed in the data source here and the data and using this viz, they started thinking about how else would they want to take a look at orders. And they created this viz. So this came about as from one of our triage folks who said, you know what, I want to take a look at all the steps that we've automated and know how quickly are they running. And then so this is a weekly aggregate of all the various steps that are automated. Each dot and each X represents one order at that step. And it contains, you can see there, how long did it take? 1/10 of a second, 100th of a second, or a second or two. And so when you look at this on a weekly basis, you're able to start seeing, did a release cause something to start slowing down or not? The other thing we've done is we've used tooltips in that you hover over an X or a dot, and you're able to see more data on that particular order. So you can see on the far right some of the outliers. Rather than having to go into the source system, you've got this viz, you hover over it, and then we've got a link directly into that order to do a little bit more research. The X's mean errors. Errors mean where humans needed to get involved to get the order processing again. We want to see less X's and more dots. Also, my VP was able to self-service on this. And so anytime that he would hear directly from people that orders were not flowing as well as they should have, he would actually go into this viz by himself. He wouldn't need to ask anybody, and he'd be able to make a judgment call if something was going well or not. And then he'd grab a screenshot of this and send it onto the triage team as something looked out of sorts for him. So rather than getting that one-liner email from your VP that says, hey, what's going on with orders? Our VP would say, what's going on with orders with this screenshot and something circled, and thereby the team was that much more, like they were less panicked. They didn't have to think about like, well, what does he mean exactly? And again, the data behind this viz allowed that team to start thinking about, well, how can we bring the errors to the stakeholders and to the people who are making prioritization decisions and balance that with all the new asks that they're coming into? Because I don't know about you all, but how often are business folks asking for new stuff, not knowing that we actually also have to maintain what they already asked for and is already in production? Happens a lot. So this viz came about, and at the top, this is 1 week, how many orders are processed on that given day. Red means how many errored out, gray is how many were successful. You want less red. By showing this viz to folks like Andrew in a weekly meeting covering all of the asks that are going on, we had more people wanting to say, well, how can we make the red go away? This is more of a weekly aggregate and the percentages. So over weeks, you could see again, okay, we had a release. Did that increase the errors we were seeing or decrease the errors that we were seeing? And then this line chart helps you take a look at the simple orders. On average, how long is it taking for them to complete? That's time in minutes. You can see that some weeks it's under 6 minutes for most of the easy orders. So it's like, well, why? What's going on with those two that spiked up to 12 minutes? That's more than 100% of what was costing us before. So this is the first time that we'll show you this diagram, but it won't be the last. And while the definition of operational excellence could be different for many people, we use this framework to help us establish, to target how do we want to tackle operational excellence. And that's how we're building a culture of OE, is by using this framework. We build a proof of concept, which you saw in that first viz. We establish a baseline, and then we continuously communicate and iterate. So the story we just walked through about order processing, that first viz was our proof of concept. We established measurements where we gained an understanding of how things were going well or not going well. And then we used these vizzes to communicate the health of our system. And then we take that feedback and iterate and continue to hopefully get better at order processing. That's my story on order processing, and I'm sticking to it. Now, back to Andrew.
Awesome. So in that story, we talked about things being broken or getting ahead of broken things. And so as I mentioned before, if we know something is broken, we're going to fix it. But when we start getting floods of stakeholder requests, it can be difficult to prioritize those without subject matter experts looking at each one of those tickets. And it's especially challenging when we get hundreds or even thousands of requests on a weekly basis. So each one of those things would require some subject matter expert to look at each one of those tickets, each one of those requests, and then stack rank it against the other things that other subject matter experts looked at. And that's super inefficient. It's just not scalable. So, these issues can range from support, enhancements, maintenance, feature requests, password resets, things that are broken that we don't know about, so on and so forth. And so the challenge that we're about to discuss is how do we effectively understand how to prioritize this work? How do we know that this request from sales is more important than this request from marketing or vice versa? And so in the absence of backlog refinement meetings or work intake or different reviews, scrums, you name it, we didn't have an objective way to prioritize this work without, again, going into each thing, and that's super difficult. So we set about to build a model that would help us do that by asking our stakeholders to answer 2 really easy pick list questions when they submit a request to us. The first question is for them to describe the impact, and the second question is for them to describe the urgency. So the answers of these questions combine to create a calculated priority level score. And then we can use that to stack rank these work items in our queue. So examples might be P1, Salesforce is down for the 1,000 or whatever users within our company that use it. Or the customer portal isn't working for all users in Europe, or something like that. Some huge issue that we need to fix. P4 might be somebody forgot their password or they can't log into their email or something like that. And so by asking our stakeholders to answer these questions, we're able to offload a lot of that evaluation work, that grooming work, to determine how important something is, such that we drop everything that we're doing that day to make sure that it's fixed in the same day. That would be our SLA for a P1, 1 day. We ensure that this request is captured and consumed in our next sprint, and we resolve it in the next week or so, or that this thing that we just got is not that important, it's not impacting any users or customers, and we can safely put it on our back burner to deal with later while we focus on more important things. So what is the true priority again? So these vises are representations of our total queue. And so on the left side, we're looking at the broader picture of what we've got as a group. So on the left side, we've got urgency on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis, we've got our impact. And so each one of those bubbles is representative of all the tickets that meet both of those criteria. So P4 on the bottom left, P1 on the top right. And as we would hope and expect, we have way less P1s than anything else. On the right side, we have a stack rank list of all of these issues in priority order by name of issue, priority level, how old that ticket is or how old that request is, and then who it's assigned to. And so from here, we can pick off these work items in order of how important they were assessed by the stakeholder that submitted. And so I'm sure that some of you guys have similar kind of like ticketing systems where you're assessing these severity or priority upon request. And as I'm sure you know, there are definitely situations where stakeholders or requesters are going to try to game this system. I am senior director of whatever org, and I'm a super important person, and I can't get into my email. And so, Heather.
Why are you looking at me?
And so I'm going to submit this request with critical urgency, critical impact. It's P1. Oh my God, everybody drop what you're doing because I'm an important person. And so in these situations, this is super impactful to the people that are doing work, right? We're seeing this major issue come in and we're going to drop everything. So in these cases, we've given the agency to our triage team and to the individuals who tickets are assigned to push back on that and say, hey, senior director person, can you tell me a little bit more about why you can't get into your email and how that's impacting all of our customers, something like that. And then Heather and other managers or leaders in our organization will back those kinds of pushback and say, yeah, that's ridiculous. We'll pump the brakes a little bit. So in addition to understanding prioritization, we're interested in understanding request by age because we want to ensure that the speed by which we work on things matches the priority that was assessed when it was submitted. So again, we expect that if we have a valid P1, we're going to drop everything so that we can fix it that day. On the very left side here, we're looking at mean age of all of our open tickets by priority level, those whisker charts. So the P1s, as we would expect, super tiny mean age. And then we have growing age as we move through our ticket priority levels. The viz on the right shows mean age week over week, trend analysis. So the orange bars are representative of mean age of open P2 tickets that week. The gray bars are representative of mean time to resolution for tickets that were resolved, and then that hash line across is our SLA that we've set for ourselves or that we communicate to our stakeholders. So if you submit us a P2 ticket, we're gonna tell you it's gonna take us 21 days to resolve. So as an example, last week, our mean age of open tickets was 81 days. We clearly have some work to do there. And then our mean time to resolution was 8 days, which is under our SLA. Either way, we have some work to do. And so as an individual member of a team or a manager of a team, I want to see what's on our plate. Because once this work is prioritized, I want to understand what I'm able to accomplish, what I'm able to get through. And so here, we're looking at trends over time. So in this example, we're looking at the Human Resources and Information Services team and what they've got. So on the far left, this is their total queue. So that blue line is representative of active tickets that they're currently working on any given week. The orange line is representative of their backlog. And then that black line is just a sum total of both. And then that red hash across is their end of quarter goal. And so with this, they can see, in any given week, somebody went on vacation, and that's why we saw this spike. Or, it was an especially quiet week, and we didn't get a lot of requests because everybody was at TC. And so we can see what's going on week over week, and if they need help, so on and so forth. That middle viz is a representation of their throughput. So the gray bars represent tickets that were created in that week. The blue represent those that were resolved. So if those gray bars consistently are bigger than the blue ones, we know that this team cannot keep up with their work. Their inputs are always exceeding their outputs, and there's a couple different things that can mean. Number one, there might be a problem child system that's consistently throwing the same error, and they can use this to say, all right, we're gonna go actually fix this problem so I can stop getting requests from whatever person and make my life better. They might need to examine their team processes. Are we as efficient as we could be in taking our work or even getting it done? Lastly, it might just be a question of resourcing. So there's always going to be situations where these teams have too much work coming into them. And with data, once we've exhausted the different options available to us, we can take this to our leadership, to our managers, and say, hey, we need a little bit of help here. Can you either give us more resources so that we can tackle all the work that's coming into us? Or can you help us offload some of this work onto other teams that have more bandwidth? And this isn't, you're complaining kind of thing. This is what the data is actually telling us. We can use that as evidence. So that last chart on the right there is simply the top 10 oldest tickets for this team. There is that one at the very tip top that's 600 and some days old, which is just outrageous. That ticket is probably not an issue anymore. Good chance that we can go ahead and resolve that. It's either been resolved or it's not a problem. And if it's not, we definitely need to fix it. There's also other ones on this list that are 90-something, 80-something days old. And whatever the priority is of these tickets, unless I got something else burning down, it's probably about time that we go and resolve these things. So back to our framework. So the previous slides, we were figuring out how we track issues by priority, assessed by the stakeholder who submits it, and the age. And so for our broader team, we built this POC by simply making this data available. Before we had this data available to everyone, we had no idea how many issues or tickets were floating around in the ether, how important those things were. We also didn't have a good way to figure out how effectively or ineffectively we were serving our customers, both internal and external. And so we established a baseline. The first week that we collected the data was our baseline. And then each week after that, as we continuously layered data on top, we would glean additional insights. Every single week, we meet as a group, ICs, managers, and leaders from our org, to review this data. We have the intention of unblocking, resourcing, asking questions, raising concerns, and making sure that everybody has what they need to get their jobs done. And all of this is with that goal of driving towards the never-ending pursuit of operational excellence. So in a vacuum on its own, this data is meaningless. If you're just over here, data, nobody looking at it, it means nothing. Similarly, if you're meeting as a group and these conversations are anecdotal, finger to the wind, I'm pretty sure that we're doing all right, that also is meaningless. But it's super powerful when you combine that data with these ongoing conversations, and that's when you start to gain really meaningful insights and can make efficient process changes for your group.
So the last pillar is determining how successful are we, or are we successful in general? So how often are our systems breaking? How often are they breaking relative to the goals we set for ourselves? Because let's face it, 100% availability is actually impossible. How was the last sprint? And then how was the last sprint deliverables compared to the previous deliverables? Are we looking to get a better understanding of estimating and saying when we think we'll be done with the projects that we're working on? My team has a lot of tickets, and how can we possibly manage that amount of work? Do I have the forum to communicate with my leadership that my team is underwater? This slide represents the idea that you need to start from somewhere. Yes, it's not Tableau, it is Excel. I had coworkers who were mortified that I was going to show you this, but guess what? We really did use Excel to get started on some of this stuff. I'm not gonna lie. So this is where we started somewhere. This is back to what Andrew was talking about. This is how we were able to first start gathering our data and take a look at it. And this allowed us to start asking simple questions. What was missing? And it forced a conversation that led to ideas to refine this initial attempt, such as, how about we try and use Tableau to look at this? It also highlighted that trying to use Excel on a weekly basis over time was going to become rather tedious. This involved a lot of manual data entry, and let's not lie, selling Excel spreadsheets over email when many people are updating it is a pain in the rump. So the quick and dirty start of using Excel and manual data entry was quickly replaced by the long-term prospects of reviewing real-time data and vizzes on an ongoing basis using our product. And this allowed us to get a baseline. So we got this baseline and we looked at it week over week and asked more questions and started refining what's missing, and we listened. And then we decided to iterate. And that's where we came up with these vizzes that you saw before, where we're able to now get to the heart of the trends, the priorities, our delivery mechanisms. People confidently shared reality with each other rather than with that, finger in the wind that Andrew had mentioned a little bit earlier. And the weekly meetings also helped. Because we got into the rhythm of showing people our vizzes, and people were able to also self-serve on these vizzes outside the meeting, people became more comfortable with what we were discussing and understanding where we were standing and having conversations about the data, not about emotions or how the team felt. But at the same time, as we iterated and continued using this over many months, we hit a plateau. We hit a plateau with Tableau, haha. And we even went a little bit backwards, and the data started changing behind us, and we needed a new data source. But because we've been meeting weekly, and because people started understanding what we were working with, the fact that we had to put a pause on this didn't alarm anybody. And now, actually, we're in the middle of that pause, building up our data sources again so we can continue to talk on this. But also because we had already set goals and KPIs, we knew where we needed to continue on to continue being successful. Now I'm going to get a little bit more targeted in scope, and I'm probably going to embarrass myself in front of this entire room, but I'm going to go back to my first love, orders, or French bulldogs, but I don't have my picture of my French bulldog. So this is a very embarrassing viz, maybe for many. For me, I'm very proud of it. This is my next attempt at vizzing, when my very first attempt was a literal recreation of an Excel spreadsheet of a bunch of names that I, showed my CFO at the time, and of course he made fun of me, and that inspired me to try and push myself out of my comfort zone with vizzing, and I came up with this. So that was one of the reasons why I created this viz, was I needed to start using our product more, and I needed to challenge myself. It was not fun, it was not easy, but I'm super proud I came up with something that I could publish onto our own Tableau server. What this shows is orders in a different way, and that orders that are taking longer in a single day, above 10 minutes, I'm aggregating all of those orders together over that one day to see if I can see spikes. And this is actually real-time data. I'm not waiting minutes or hours. I'm able to get this data within seconds of an order completing. And this helps me understand if we are starting to see something related to order processing slowing down immediately. And I had no idea that I was ever going to use it in real time in the heat of the moment of an incident, but I did. And this gives me the confidence to agree with the person calling me up to say, I think we have a problem with orders. I'm able to grab this within a minute. And I don't know how many of you deal with incidents, but when you get that phone call and you need to start making split-second decisions, like in a matter of seconds, do I call this person and this person and this person? Because it's 6:30 p.m. on a Friday night. Do I really need to get those folks back in the office or not? I've actually used this to help me make that decision that much faster rather than being like, oh, should I or should I not? Something that I was just challenging myself on using our product, I've actually come to use in real life, which I thought was pretty awesome. So back to our framework. Success can mean a lot of different things. It can be your own personal success at Vizzing, and that you go beyond something that looks exactly like an Excel spreadsheet and you're able to use something in the heat of the moment. Or it could be a Viz in use by the whole of the leadership team and our program managers on a weekly basis to review all of the asks and understand if we're reaching our goals. And we've got our framework up here again, where we start somewhere and we build that proof of concept. We establish the baseline by getting your data, and we iterate, and maybe we even plateau and go backwards. That's okay because we've been communicating and collaborating. And I would say that part of the success in that is that when we had to say that we needed to pause in some of the Vizzes and the data sources, the success in that was nobody said, wait, what? We're not going to meet next week? It's because we had been communicating, collaborating, and iterating, and everybody knew where we stood at that time. So when you're using it all the time and people start to understand the nuances, they want to start working with you rather than against you because they have all that information at their fingertips rather than trying to guess at what you mean. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Andrew, who's going to give an amazing demo.
All right. So before we get into Tableau, let's walk through a little bit of story, frame up this problem. So we have got a customer, and she is super excited to see Tableau. There she is. You can see on her face how excited she is. Okay, so she goes to tableau.com/trial, where she's going to download her trial of Tableau. From there, once she downloads, she is confronted with this, the product registration screen. On here, she's going to put her name, company, email, things like that. With that data, we're going to pick it up. We're going to put it into our registration database. And from there, we have this middleware integration, the reg integration, that picks up that data, picks up that registration event record, and passes it to our email automation platform. The reason we do this is because when somebody's trialing Tableau, our marketing team wants to reach out to them, wants to send them emails saying, hey, here are cool things that you can do with Tableau. Here's cool things other people can do with Tableau. If you're new to the product, here's how to use it, so on and so forth. And so when somebody's trialing Tableau, we want to make sure that we can send them those emails, and we can send them really, really quickly. So on a Friday evening, Friday afternoon, we started getting emails and phone calls from our marketing team saying, hey, we're pretty sure that when customers are trialing the product, that registration data isn't getting to our email automation platform as quickly as we need it to. That was it. We didn't know if it was isolated to just a couple users, if it was all users, no idea, no more information than that. So because we know that we're looking between these two systems, we're going to talk about this guy, that reg integration platform. Okay, so let's hop into Tableau and see if we can figure out where this problem is happening. So Before I get started, I just want to quickly mention all of this data has been anonymized and it has been abstracted from our original form, so it's not quite real, but it is representative. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at two different data sets. The first one is our registration database. And like I said, on a Friday afternoon, that's when we started getting those requests, and like the dedicated Tableau employee that I am, I registered a trial on Sunday evening at 7:30 p.m. because I wanted to understand if I can track that registration through our systems, if I can pinpoint where that problem is. So let's go ahead and find my registration event. So we'll filter down to the emails. Here is mine, andrewlevy@tableau.com. And then we'll go ahead and drag both of these into our rows, and we want to understand exactly when this was registered. So we'll look at this by minute, and then discrete because we want to see what we're looking at. So I know that's a little tiny, but what we have here is my registration event, andrewlevy@tableau.com, September 9th, which is a Sunday, 7:31 p.m. Okay, perfect, we found it. So we'll go ahead and call this tab Andrew's Reg. So then again, the problem we're trying to solve is, what is that latency between systems? So then let's go ahead and look in our email automation platform to see if we can find that same submission record. So we'll call this Andrew's submission. Andrew's sub. Okay, so we're gonna open up our next data set, which is our EAP submissions data. And we're gonna go ahead and try and find the same record. So again, filter down to email. Here is mine, just on top. Isn't that handy? andrewlevy@tableau.com. And then we've got email, submission date, and trial start date. We're gonna drop all of these things into our rows, again, just so we can see this individual record. Going to flip to minute, and then make this discrete so I can see what I'm looking at here. Okay, so again, we found this record in our secondary system, andrewlevy@tableau.com. The trial start date is the same, exactly what I expected it to be, Sunday, September 9th, 7:31 p.m. And then on the other side, the submission time is September 9th, 2018, 7:40 p.m., so 9 minutes later. That 9 minutes is under our 1 hour SLA of data transfer. We need that data to transfer in less than an hour. So that's good. That one worked like we expected it to. And that is just for this specific case. So the next step that I'm gonna do is try to look at this in aggregate and see if I can figure out, is this impacting just a couple users or many? So I'm gonna create a calculated field so I can systematically find this submission latency. I like to put calc at the beginning of my calculated field so I can find them easier later. And then we'll just go ahead and do a quick date diff, and we wanna understand exactly that latency time. So we're gonna look at date part of minute. Our start date is trial start date, and then our end is submission date. And so I mentioned that the SLA is an hour, so rather than understanding this exactly by minutes, we're gonna look at it in terms of hours, so divide by 60. Okay, so then let's just go ahead and drag this into our rows so that we can make sure we did this right. Perfect, okay, so again, problem we're trying to solve, latency between systems. It took 0.15 hours or 9 minutes to get between systems. So we have successfully isolated my one registration. So now let's see if we can see a pattern in this data, see how big this problem is. So we're gonna go ahead and drag our submission date at the top. And what I wanna understand here is, on an hour by hour basis, what is the average submission latency between systems? Okay, perfect. And so we're gonna flip this to average, and then we're gonna look at this in terms of bars because it's a little easier to see. And so now we're starting to see a bit of a pattern. We're starting to see these peaks and valleys of registration latency between systems. So again, this data is abstracted, but what it looks like here is we have a latency from just under an hour to almost 6 hours at any given point in time. And because we're starting to see these waves, these peaks and valleys, this smells a lot like a volume problem to me. So in a second, we're gonna look and see on the registration side how many volumes we get, or how many registrations by volume we get on a daily basis. But first, because I mentioned that we have an hour SLA, Let's go ahead and add a reference line in here so we can see just how often we are missing that SLA. And so we'll make this hashed, orange, and big. Okay, so we are missing it a lot. All right, and so we'll call this reg latency. Okay, so then again, we want to see how many registrations are we getting on a daily basis. So we'll call this tab daily reg, and we're going to go back to our registration data set. Registration date time in the column section, flip this to day, and then simply drop number of records into our rows, and then label it. And so what we're seeing here is on a regular weekday, we have between 6,000 and maybe 9,000 registrations per day. And then those middle 2 days are weekends. And so registration volume is lower there, which we would expect. People are typically trying Tableau at work. So let's see if there is any correlation between what we just found by making a dashboard. So here, this is actually pretty striking. What we're seeing is that volume of registrations on a daily basis almost one-to-one correlates with that latency between systems. And so what we've just done is built a POC to measure the system health, and we have established our baseline to see, okay, it's taking anywhere from just under an hour to like 6 hours for that data to transfer. So let's jump back into our slide presentation. So in that real world example, we built a POC to see the data that we needed to take action. We established a baseline to understand the health of that system, and then we communicated that data to the team. I cut a ticket to the integration team to go fix this. They report to Heather. We will continue to iterate on this by automating the data. So what I just did was obviously super manual. We want to make sure that we can collect this data and see it in real time. And then we're communicating this data not only by cutting a ticket, but also sending alarms to these teams saying, hey, this latency is more than an hour. Go see what's going on here. And so in this case, we also stuck to our model of operational excellence. We found the broken thing. We were able to objectively prioritize the request to fix that thing by submitting a P1 ticket. A bunch of users are impacted by this broken thing, and including the data to support that claim. We're also able to track the success of us fixing it by looking at that data in real time. And so kind of going back to our cheeky title, I didn't need to ask what I should be doing. I already knew. I got reports that something was broken. I went and looked at the data, confirmed it was indeed broken, and cut a ticket. The engineers on Heather's team, on the integration team, similarly did not need to ask her as their manager or me as the PM what they should be working on. They also already knew. They had a request backed up by data to go work on the fix for this. So that is the time that we've got together with you guys. You have been excellent. There is a survey in your app, as I'm sure you're aware. Please don't let the fact that it's Heather's birthday skew those results. Last of all, though, we want to thank you guys for coming to our session. Double thank you for sticking with us to the very last session, very last day. Most of all, we want to thank you for coming to TC18 in New Orleans with us this year. We're going to take the next 5 or 10 minutes to answer any questions that anybody has. Thank you.